I've been practicing medicine for over 25 years, and I've seen it. The world is hurting, people are sick, and even with our greatest scientific discoveries and technological breakthroughs, trends in health are not getting better. We weren't designed for this. This world as we know it, it's not our home. But there is a remedy. Our Creator designed us to be resilient creatures, and He's given us clues in the scriptures that have dramatic implication for our lives today. Let's talk about biblical prescriptions. Let's take a serious look at living as God intended. Are you ready? Let's get well, and let's go home.
Welcome to the Biblical Prescriptions for Life podcast, presented by Heartwise Ministries. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, here with Dr. James L. Marcum. He's a friend, he's also a physician, and the author of a 7-week Bible study program called Biblical Prescriptions for Life. On today's program, we'll be getting to know Dr. Marcum's perspective on healing and learning what the scriptures say when it comes to living well. The advice given in this podcast is not intended to replace the care of your primary physician, and Dr. Marcum insists that listeners always talk to their doctor before making changes to their healthcare regimen. If you like what you hear on today's podcast, we encourage you to find us online at biblicalprescriptions.com/podcast for a free offer, as well as a discount on the Biblical Prescriptions for Life study materials. Thanks again for joining us today. And Dr. Marcum, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Nick. It's such a good to be with you today, and I'm excited about getting to know the people that might be listening and viewing this, and we're just happy. It's a great day outside here in Eastern Tennessee. So thanks for everyone for joining us.
Yeah, and this is the first episode of the podcast that we do. A few other things, we have some television programs out there, and we also have a radio program called Heartwise. But this is brand new, so thank you everybody for joining us. And let's just learn a little bit about who you are and what you do. You're a cardiologist?
Yeah, I'm a practicing cardiologist with the Chattanooga Heart Institute, and that's a group here in Tennessee, and we predominantly work out of a hospital called Memorial Hospital. And we have numerous offices in the location. That's where I practice primary cardiology. But I went to school at the University of Texas, where I got my degree, University of Texas, San Antonio. Did my undergraduate in Austin. I'm a Longhorn, so
all right,
we say hook 'em horns. And then after that, we moved over to the East Coast, and I did my internal medicine training at the Medical Center of Delaware in Wilmington. And then I decided I wanted to be a cardiologist, and I moved to Lexington, Kentucky, University of Kentucky, did my cardiology fellowship there. And I practiced in the Cincinnati area and in the Nashville area before moving to Chattanooga in about the year 2001. So that's sort of my journey. And in each step of the way, I've learned a little bit about medicine and what makes up modern medicine. But as I've gone through life, I've realized that what they taught me in medical school doesn't encompass all of healing. They just taught us sort of the acute care medicine and how to put out disasters and treat symptoms. So I sort of learned how to treat causes, and also learned how to incorporate the best textbook for medicine available, where our true north is, our truth is, and that's in the Holy Scriptures. And I want to encourage everyone out there that whenever you have questions in your life, whether it be healthcare or spiritual questions, or if you're going to church and have doctrine, that you look there. That's where God wants you to look for answers in your life. And God has promised us through that relationship with Him, He's going to give us the answers. And the answers for Nick might not be the same as the answers for me or the answers for you. But God has promised in that relationship, not only that His Son has saved us and given us eternal life. That's something that we just take right now. But as we grow in that relationship, He'll open our eyes to truth, and He'll help us make changes in our lives and lead us towards real healing.
Yeah, that sounds great. So how many years have you been practicing cardiology?
Yeah, well, I've been practicing cardiology. I started my cardiology training in 19, oh boy, man, this is quite a few years. I finished medical school in 91, and I actually started probably about 1997. So that's quite quite a few years now.
Coming up on 30 years, huh?
Coming up on 30 years. That's scary. Now, I don't look that old, do I?
No, of course not.
I'm looking much younger, so I don't look that old. But sometimes I feel that old.
Yeah.
In fact, we started, I'm going to digress, Nick. We started our family a little bit later in life than most. We started in our 30s. And my daughter just had her 20th birthday this last week. So that then I said, man, I'm getting a few years on me. And I know you have a few little kids. You got a ways to look on. But when you see how things move through life so quick, the time just seems to go by. But yeah, I've been practicing since that time in cardiology, but I graduated from medical school back in 1991. So I guess I've been a physician since 1991.
Yeah. So 30 years in medicine, you've got to have just a ton of different experiences there. What's one of the most meaningful cases that comes to memory?
Well, one of the ones that always sticks out in my mind, it actually happened when I first started. I was practicing as an internist at the Medical Center of Delaware. I was put in charge of taking care of a young firefighter that had a multiple myeloma. That's a bone marrow cancer. And he was about my age. And he had a couple kids, and he was a big, robust guy when they made this diagnosis. And back in those days, they treated multiple myeloma with chemotherapy and eventually a bone marrow transplant. And I can remember him, and we got to know each other. And first they bombarded him with chemo that killed all of his cells and made him susceptible to infection. So he almost became a bubble man. Couldn't have plants in the room, couldn't eat certain foods. Anything that might carry any infection, they kept away. Couldn't see his family that much. When we went in, we had to gown and glove. It was a very sterile environment. He went through the first round of chemotherapy, and he got better. And the goal was to see if it would come back. But unfortunately, over the course of the year, the multiple myeloma came back. The first round of chemo didn't do it. So the next step was to, again, kill out his cells that might be making the cancer and give him new bone marrow, a bone marrow transplant. So we did that, and it just went on and on over the course of the year. And I could see this robust gentleman getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And I also saw a young man that was once in control over his life lose control. And I saw his family, they were concerned and almost they were scared. What's going to happen to my husband? What's going to happen to my father? And it was really scary. But eventually, as time went on, he came in and got a severe infection. And it was from the chemo, and this was after the bone marrow transplant. And this infection just ravaged his body. We gave him transfusions of platelets and blood cells and multiple antibiotics and antifungus and antiviral, everything we could have, IVs, everything. And despite everything modern medicine had to offer, he passed away. And that made such an impact on me to see someone my age pass away. But I think that what made a bigger impact is I realized at that point a couple things. I realized that modern medicine didn't have all the answers for life's problems. And I also wish that I had talked to him or I had known more about eternal healing. I know he had his pastor there, but I wish I would have talked to him and said, you know what? Even though, things aren't looking good here, no matter what happens, you're in God's hands. And in God's hand, he's promised, if you believe in me, you're going to have everlasting life. That's the gospel. And you're going to have that. You can hold on to that. So you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to have fears. You have that. And at that point in my life, I wasn't mature enough in my Christian faith to be bold enough to step out and say those things. But at that time, Nick, I realized that there was something more. And that's when I sort of gradually over time began looking in the Bible for truths and way I could incorporate biblical principles and God's principles that he's had all along into my patient's life. So this was back in the early 90s that I started on this journey that's led me to this point in time. And where we're at in time right now is, there's it's like walking on a road. You have your road, but you have ditches on the left and right. Mm-hmm. The ditches are the real conservative people that say, oh, we can't, we don't need modern medicine. We can do it all with lifestyle. And then there's the other side that says, no, modern medicine is a key. But the real path is in the middle, focusing on Christ as the source of healing. Now, so, there's many places for liberals and conservatives, but as our audience listens, I'm more of a moderate. There's a place for both worlds, but at the head of all the worlds. We want our ultimate healer. That's where we want to look for real answers in life. So that's sort of what differentiates my philosophy maybe from others. And I'm committed to putting Christ's word and his biblical at the truth and presenting the gospel and worship as a real source of healing in people's lives. Because we never know, a lightning bolt might hit me, a car might run over me, but I am safe. I know that I'm going to have healing. It's just where, when, and how. And now I have a mission to move forward with in spreading this type of information to as many people as I can, not only to help them in healing, but to promote the gospel and let them know the balance of modern medicine, lifestyle medicine, and belief systems.
So I really like that approach to health and healing, but I bet there's a lot of people out there that haven't heard this type of idea before, that the Bible has answers to some of our healthcare problems. Mm-hmm. It's not one of the first places people think to look. Yeah. So what do you say to people that are skeptics?
Well, I would first, I'm going to work on you. I'd say, you're in my office with a medical problem, and I'm saying, look at our healthcare now, mm-hmm. The rates of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, stroke, obesity, diabetes, sleep apnea. Every year, the rates go higher and higher.
Right. Are
people getting better? Every year, more prescriptions, more commercials, more people out there. In fact, $1 in $4 to $1 in $5 is spent on healthcare. Are people getting better? What does the evidence say to you? In fact, they just published an article looking at heart disease last year, and the rate of heart deaths have now gone up. They're now looking at the person's lifespan, and right now, someone that's born now for the first time ever is going to have less longevity than our generation.
I just read about that.
Yeah. So the answer is our system has its holes, right? Mm-hmm. No problem.
Sure.
So you agree on that. The next thing I would have to convince you of is the truth in the Bible. And that would take a long discussion, and I went through that at the University of Texas. I read a book called More Than a Carpenter by Josh McDowell. And in that book, he convinced me, but I looked at the evidence. I looked at all the prophecies, that were thousands and thousands of years, every one of them true. Mm-hmm. Then I looked at the life of Christ. People actually saw Christ living. They saw him. It just wasn't one or two people. It was lots of people. The archaeology. And then I said, wow, the Bible, there's the probability, you look at all the probability, it has to be true based on just math alone. Mm-hmm. Then I realized, well, let me look at the medicine part of it. And let me see if I can find science that backs up the health principles in the Bible. And lo and behold, every biblical principle in health that's given in the Bible, we're finding science that proves it. And there's some things that science hasn't found, but we're finding more and more science. And this has happened through when we sequence the DNA, we can now see what the DNA. Now, when I first started, we couldn't look at that. All the genes, what activates them. We now have MRIs and MRAs that can look in the brain functioning. We didn't have that to this degree, and we're getting more and more technology, but the technology proves that the Bible's true. So what I decided to do is I said, listen, if there's all these pharmaceutical companies, changing the body's physiology, God has made recommendations on many things. Why wouldn't God also be concerned about our health? He's concerned about our relationships, our finances. He's concerned mm-hmm. about healing us. Why wouldn't he also be concerned about our physical health?
Right.
And as I looked, I said, lo and behold, he is. And he's giving us prescriptions in the scriptures that treats chronic disease, that also prevents disease. I know that our genetic makeup is flawed, and that's going to cause problems as well. And I agree for disasters and acute care, modern medicine has its place. But for chronic disease, biblical prescriptions really felt a niche, and I went back and found the evidence-based science behind it. Now, all of the things don't have evidence-based science behind it yet. But if we keep digging and looking and doing the research, we'll have this. So not only have I sort of learned those techniques, but I'm trying to find practical ways to apply it to people's lives one step at a time, giving them options to think about. But foremost, I want them to plug into that relationship with the living God that gives them the power to see truth, to make changes, and also not to be discouraged. Feel like, yes, I can do this. I don't have to worry. No matter what happens, God's in control over my life. And as we've done this, I've seen my patients reverse disease, get off medicines, feel better, get better. It's really changed. Once you have the right tools to use in a practice, it's a lot more fun. Now, if I had a gentleman that came to me sick with a bone marrow problem, I would have treatment to offer him, permanent treatment.
Right. So you mentioned there's some of the scientific research. Can you quote any names of people that back up these ideas about biblical prescriptions?
For instance, we've nutrition, okay? T. Colin Campbell has shown some nutritional studies. Dr. Esselstyn has done a lot of work on nutrition out there. Those are a couple out there. Nutrition in the brain world. We got Dr. Newberg at the University of Pennsylvania. We've also got at Harvard University, Dr. Benson. He does some of the mind-body research. We have more and more people that are adding to this body of knowledge all the time, and sometimes they don't realize it.
Right. Yeah.
They'll do a study on music and see how music improves their bodies. Then we go back and say, David said that, music, and the angels were singing, that must be a biblical prescription. Well, so they've proven the science behind biblical principles, and that really wasn't their goal when they started.
Right.
So I've learned how to make some 1-minute spots that impress people on the Bible-based scripture, and also I give them the science, and hopefully they can apply it to their lives to change the physiology of the entire body.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at one of those later.
Yeah.
We're going to have a good listen to that. Let's talk a little bit more about this. Some of the stuff that you're talking about isn't necessarily always applicable, I don't think, because say, you get a big cut on your arm and you're bleeding to death. Mm-hmm. There's not a biblical prescription for that necessarily.
No, there's not.
But if you're having a heart attack?
Yeah, no, if you're having acute emergency, that's what I'm saying, an acute care problem, that's a place for modern medicine. But think about that for a second, if your heart's going to, but where did that technology come from? Ultimately, who gave the gifts for that to occur? We might give antibiotics, but God gave someone the ability to figure out what an antibiotic was and what it does.
That's true. Yeah.
And ultimately, even though we help the healing process, the body and through God actually does the healing. Like even if you have an infection, the immune system actually does the infection, not the antibiotic. Even though you're bleeding, you might hold pressure and tie it up, but God's ability to clot is actually what does it. And even when modern medicine does help you, you still want, sometimes modern medicine doesn't always win, as in my case with the bone marrow transplant. But even though it doesn't win, you still can be healed.
Right.
So I have some people, Nick, that come to me and their health is just really in bad shape. And there's really nothing that can be done. And yet we know that when they have that relationship with God, they can start somewhere and have healing. And that gives them peace and confidence inside that everything doesn't have to be perfect. Everything doesn't happen at once. God's grace is enough to make up for our imperfections, even if it's genetic imperfections. So modern medicine is great for acute problems, it's great for genetic problems, and it's great for other problems to help us get over the symptom until we can get at the cause.
Right, yeah.
But ultimately, even through modern medicine, if you look at where did the ability to heal comes from, I still want to give credit to our God who gave people the individual to figure this out, and for the body itself that God's given the ability to heal.
Yeah, so one of the best things that we can do for us is listen to these biblical prescriptions and change our lifestyle in order to fend off disease.
Yep. But what I've learned, and I've learned this personally, Nick, that the change, you can't do it because you want to do it.
Right. We're not strong enough on our own.
No, we can't do some of these things.
Yeah.
It's with God's help working in us that gives us the power to see what we need to do and gives us the power to make these steps one step at a time. And change is difficult, especially when we've lived like this. We got these genetic programs that says, yes, you have to have this. But that's what we try to do is teach people how you can make steps. And here's this first step. Here's the second step. Don't get discouraged. And God's going to help you go where he wants you to go.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about biblical prescriptions for life. We've talked about it just in general. What is it specifically?
Well, Biblical Prescriptions for Life is a 7-week Bible study that's basically designed to not only improve your health, but it's also designed as something you can share with your friends and neighbors. Let's say someone wants to lose blood pressure or lower their risk of heart attack or help complement treatment for cancer or any other disease. Well, they can go through this 7-week series, and it can be more if people want to. And they can not only learn how to do it one step at a time, they can learn biblical prescriptions that they can apply. Then they can share it. For instance, one week we talk about what causes disease. Another one we talk about simple things like drinking water, being outside, moving. But we also talk about, the spiritual implications. The physical and spiritual go together. As the physical gets better, the spiritual gets better. As the spiritual gets better, the physical life gets better. And all of this leads us to healing. And so it's very exciting when people start to put those things together. And it's very interactive. People watch a video for a few minutes and they go over discussions. They have a lesson that they take each day, look at it. And then there's practical things that they can do, not only to help themselves, but to help their community, and it links people together. It's a really good program for people. It starts wherever you're at. You can gain something from this 7-week Bible study, Biblical Prescriptions for Life.
That's right. And if you can press play on a DVD player or on your computer and show the video to the group and facilitate a small discussion, then you can lead a Biblical Prescriptions for Life study, right?
Right. And what I like about it, not only does it help our health, maybe get us off of medicine, helps us feel better, makes our spiritual life better, but it's something that we can use to spread the gospel. It's sometimes hard to talk to people about the gospel, but we end in my favorite week in the physiology of worship, how worship in itself changes our very DNA, changes our brains, helps improve our bodies. And it shows the physiology behind it. And it lets people know that when they worship, they change their body. When they change their body through worship, God gives them power to enable these lifestyle changes that we've talked about. And then when a person realizes, worship's important, they can invite their friends. Hey, you saw worship, how it improves your health, just like water or moving. Why don't you come to church with me and worship some more and grow in health in worship?
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a great approach. Let's take a quick listen here. We've got a 60-second clip of a television spot that you made where we're talking about a simple idea from the scriptures that we can employ today, which will help us live a healthier tomorrow. Let's take a listen.
I'm Dr. James Marcum with your Biblical Prescription for Life. Patients come into the office every day with the complaint of feeling fatigued and tired. One of the biblical prescriptions I give those type of patients is found in Isaiah 44, verse 3. And that says, "For I will pour water on him who is thirsty." Well, why do we need water? Every cell in the body needs water to function optimally, from the head to the heart to the blood vessels. We need water. Without water, we get dehydrated and become tired and fatigued. So water is a biblical prescription for life. Think of it, water is in every cell of the body. Water is also throughout the entire earth. So when you're a little bit tired, not feeling like you have energy, I want you to think about this biblical prescription. Drink water. Think of Isaiah 44, verse 3.
So something as simple as water is a relevant biblical prescription.
Yeah. Now, I was talking to you off air, and I know you're a biker.
Yeah,
okay?
That's right.
If you went biking and didn't have enough water, how long would you last on that bike?
Not too long. It's going to be a bad day.
It's going to be a very bad day. In fact, they've estimated that in the United States, 7 out of 10 people do not hydrate themselves or drink enough water every day. So not only do we have water for every cell in our body, but we also want the living water.
Right.
When you have the living water and physical water, it improves every cell in the body.
Yeah, that's true. So, Dr. Marcum, who is this program for? Is this for just people who are really sick or people who are just, pretty good health, or who's it for?
This program is for everyone. Someone might know all the principles in this, and I still think it's for them because it helps strengthen their spiritual side. If someone doesn't do anything or know anything about health, it's definitely for them. It's great for people that just want to help their friends and neighbors. It's something that they can use. So this program is really for everyone, for families, for older people, for younger people. Everyone can benefit. For those that don't want to enter the modern medicine world, that wants to stay healthy, it's for them. It helps prevent disease.
Right.
For people that have disease and want to manage it better, it's for them. So really, this program can benefit everyone. We've had people that are older take it. We've had people that are younger take it. We've had professionals take it. We've had doctors take it. It's really, there's something, a benefit to everyone. And what's so neat about this program is that as you go through it, your relationship with God changes, and God helps you see things in your lives maybe that you haven't thought about before. And then you can add that. And as God works, the Holy Spirit works in people's lives, and a change occurs.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Marcum, thank you for sharing with us today about biblical prescriptions for life.
My pleasure, Nick, and thank you for having me.
That's about all the time we have on today's podcast. But thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions about anything you've heard today, we want you to visit the website at biblicalprescriptions.com/podcast. You can submit your question there. And if you really like what Dr. Marcum shared today, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform you listen on. And that'll help spread the good news of healing to others who are searching for it. Thanks again for listening. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, inviting you to join us for another podcast next week where we'll be discussing more about getting well and going home.